It's good to celebrate significant events, and there's something about having a birthday or an anniversary with a zero on the end. It's much more of a party and certainly a celebration of God's faithfulness over 50 years for a wonderful organisation called Tearfund. Joining me on the program now is Tearfund New Zealand CEO Ian McInnes. Ian, kia ora, welcome to the program. Happy anniversary, I suppose.
Kia ora, thank you very much. That's right, 50 years. It's a tremendous thing to be celebrating. We're really chuffed. We've been around that long.
Now, you're the CEO at the moment, not saying that you were there before the Masked Man and Boy 50 years ago, but take us back 50 years ago. What was it? Some terrible maths from me, but 1975? Gosh, I'm not sure what I was doing in 1975. It was a different era, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, it was 1975, Tearfund set up in New Zealand, about 7 years after it had set up in the UK, but some of the factors were the same. The unravelling of empire, British Empire around the world was what triggered it, late 1960s. A famine in Biafra, which is an area, of Nigeria, problems in Hong Kong and in Palestine, as it was called. If you jump to New Zealand, problems in Vietnam and Cambodia, off the back of the Vietnam War, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and really mission agencies at absolute capacity.
Yep.
And so looking for a relief fund, and hence you get Tearfund, the Evangelical Alliance Relief Fund, establishing first the UK and then down here in New Zealand.
And for some people, they just know you as Tearfund, and I know in Australia it's just called Tear, but that's the origins of it. Very much Christian at the heart. This is the Evangelical Church's response to humanitarian disaster, and hey, a lot's changed in 50 years, but that hasn't changed, Ian.
That hasn't changed, and with good reason. We haven't really fully solved the problem. Some things have got a lot better in that time.
Yep.
There's a lot less of the population on Earth today who are in absolute poverty. That would be around 800 million today. It was 2 billion as recently as 1990. Half the population of the globe now. It's just 8%. Some things, however, have got worse. There are now twice as many refugees at 123 million people displaced than 10 years ago. Still 50 million people in slavery, still 330 million children in poverty, despite all the work of child sponsorship organisations like us. So it's a really mixed picture over that 50 years. But one thing is true: God has showed up time and time again in the places that we work, and with just tremendous support from Kiwis, enabling a ton of good over that time.
Moving on from, I suppose, the origins back 50 years ago, for a lot of people, they will know Tearfund as the child sponsorship of people. Your partnership with Compassion International, this was a key aspect of what Tearfund was in the early days and still continues to be.
Yeah, look, 1986, we joined forces with Compassion. As of today, there are around 10,000 children sponsored by Kiwis across the globe. If you add them all up over that time, there'd be around 40,000 children. That's
Wow.
40,000 individual lives lifted out of poverty by walking alongside that child until they reach maturity. And the stories are just tremendous of those lives changed. And so we're really proud of that. And that really is Kiwis getting behind just a wonderful work, the work of child sponsorship and the work of supporting the local church to reach out to children in poverty.
It is such a wonderful model as well. And look, the world has changed during the time, and I know there's some challenges with child sponsorship, and there's some parts of the world it's not possible to do that. But that relational connection where people say, hey, yes, I care about this, but I also have a relationship with somebody that I'm helping, that connection, that almost spiritual bond is so important, isn't it?
It's hard to describe in a way. It can get a bad rap and it's a bit unfair. It's quite unfair. I mean, at a simple level, it's a pen pal. Now, it's a lot more. We might have called it that in the past. It's a
Yeah,
lot more than that. The number of children who've pulled out their file full of letters they've received from their sponsor. And that's just complementing the work of their mum and their dad, and their church, and wrapping that support around them from all of those people. And sponsors get it. They just genuinely love those kids. They
yeah,
write to them from time to time. They form an engagement. And it often forms a connection for their children back here. Say a Kiwi family with kids might sponsor a child of a similar age. Well, I can't think of a better way to help a child in New Zealand grow up today and get off their device for 5 minutes, and connect with a child somewhere else around the world, read about their experiences and actually write
yeah.
or type their experiences back and forge that personal connection.
Wanting to talk about I suppose, the difference between relief and development. As we said, when Tearfund started off, it started in response to a disaster, to famine,
Yes.
a natural disaster. And that's still very much a part of what you do, that working with partners, you're responding to crises as they happen. But also the development side of things, of equipping people to be ahead of the game, not just responding to the disasters, but improving the situation for people in some pretty challenging parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have always responded to disasters. If you go back as far as the Rwandan genocide,
Yeah,
Tearfund raised $1.8 million through its supporters. If you jump to the Indian Ocean tsunami, the
yeah,
start of my career in this area, we raised $2.7 million. And these were big appeals and big responses. And even to this day, in the last 3 years, Kiwis will have put $4 million, including New Zealand government money, into Ethiopia and East Africa, where there's a tremendous drought taking hold. And so that remains a real feature of what we do, and probably always will be. But alongside that, community development projects that help lift people from poverty, secure them from vulnerability, work on things like human trafficking or child trafficking. That's the bread and butter of what we do, and that is reducing that vulnerability of poorer communities and setting them on a pathway to some degree of security and prosperity and spiritual development, without all that risk that just sits constantly around you. If you're poor and you have no insurance and you have limited assets and you're a disaster prone part of the world,
yeah.
that risk is really prevalent and very real.
Something that Tearfund does very well is avoiding the whole sort of savior mentality. Okay, here in the West, we can come in with our aid program. We can help these poor people in these terrible parts of the world. It's very much something, again, which happens relationally. It happens with local partners. It happens with micro enterprise programs. It gives people the respect, the mana, to be able to solve their own problems, rather than saying, "Hey, we're from the West. We can come in with our money and fix your problems." Right?
And of course, we can't come in with our money and fix our problems. And how patronizing is that? Imagine someone turning up in our country, here, let me fix your problems. I mean, the answer is it's local organizations and local partners who can help assist the poorest in fixing their own problems. Even they would say it's through full participation of those who are in poverty. That's the only way we get a solution. I mean, we have our partner from Ethiopia, Bereket's his name. He's out traveling the country with us. He does a wonderful job of explaining this. And of course, he is an Ethiopian Christian leader of
Hmm.
some repute. And he runs an agency that just helps tens of thousands of people to improve their agricultural practices. And then, when necessary, like the drought they now have, to provide emergency relief. There's no way we would know. We'd have some idea, but there's no way we can go and do that. So we partner with them to do that. And that's probably the fundamental difference. All aid agencies have their strengths. A really strong suit for Tearfund is finding and sourcing wonderful Christian local partners who fully understand the challenges in front of them, and then backing them for many, many years to get to grips with those issues and create really real and lasting change. One more quickly, our other guy traveling with us, Premier, is from the Solomon Islands. He's getting to grip with the human trafficking and the sexual exploitation and the violence towards women and girls and boys in the islands. Nobody really wants to talk about this in the
Yeah.
islands, but he's shining a light on it, bringing it to the fore, putting bylaws in place in the villages, strengthening the legal system, and at the same time educating and strengthening a community's resolve to tackle these things. These are the sort of brilliant local partners that Tearfund gets behind.
We talked at the beginning about how this was the church's response to disaster and to need around the world. And there are other Christian organisations, there are other aid and development organisations that are motivated by faith, but there's something distinctive about the way Tearfund does it. And because of your Christian distinctive, I know that there are choices. There are places that you cannot work. There are partnerships that you cannot have, and yet you choose to make that as a distinctive of who you are. Why is it essential to your DNA, do you think, Ian?
We have concluded that unless you're developing spiritually, as well as physically and relationally, and in step with your natural resource and your environment, unless you're taking that as a whole, you're missing a really key ingredient for change. And that is the heartfelt conviction as to who I am on this earth, the purpose I have in God, and how that encourages me to relate to those other factors like my neighbours, the planet, God himself.
Yep.
And so we make no bones about it. We're not shy about that. We seek out partners who develop people holistically, for whom a Christian curricula is part and parcel, whether that's child sponsorship or whether that's disaster approach. Or an approach to disasters. And you
Yep.
do find that in some places in the world, it just needs to be brought to the fore. How does my faith impact how I tackle those problems as an individual and as a community? So all of our partners are really, this is a strong area for them in articulating matters of faith among communities so that they can bring God into the picture, prayer, support one for another, and spiritual development, as well as the very material things which are right there through Scripture. It's not a dichotomy. It's not one versus the other.
Yep.
God wants to see all of those areas prosper and all whole in our lives.
The way in which Tearfund works with other organisations, as I mentioned, you're not the only game in town. There are other organisations, and I'm sure we could name quite a list. But there's also the way in which those organisations work collaboratively rather than competitively. There's something which, again, speaks of spiritual value there, that you're not fighting for NZ aid money. You're working together to make the world a better place.
I mean, a couple of examples. Very recently, Save the Children, they're secular.
Yep.
World Vision, they're Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Tearfund, we're Christian, and our partner in the Solomons are pushing on legislation right as we speak through the Solomon Islands Parliament that will change the Marriage Act. Now, why is that important? Because you can marry at 14 or 15, and that's being exploited by migrant labour into the island and the logging industry, for example, and driven by poverty in communities. Well, if you change that act, then we can do something about that. We've got one more string to our bow. We've strengthened the legal system, even while we educate communities. So there you have secular and Christian side by side. I think people think we compete, and we actually collaborate on the ground a whole lot more than people would realise. And certainly in disaster zones, and I come from this, you're almost falling over each other, and you're quickly dividing up the work to be done. And the Seventh-day Adventists are particularly strong in their water and sanitation work. World Vision work at scale and can move food like nobody else. Tearfund can get to the grassroots and the mindset change that communities might need in the way they think about their relationship with poverty and with their neighbour, and deliver agricultural livelihood development or protection, whatever is required. So we all have our different strong suits, and we work a lot closer than many people think. And dare I say it, even the UN system, which gets a bad rap because it can be a little expensive, it's a very necessary glue that binds together, say, government policy and those big agencies like the World Health Organization, UNICEF, which is a global organization for children, provide wonderful policy and report documents and structure within which many of us work. And without them, we might be running a little blind on a few issues. So I'm a strong advocate for having all of it,
Mm.
because it's going to take all of it to fix the problems in God's creation.
Exactly. Now, I know some people might struggle with that, with some of the partnerships and the alliances. I mean, you mentioned UN, but also in terms of working with New Zealand Aid as well. Okay, there's some government contracts, and I think particularly in recent years, an increasing relationship between Tearfund and New Zealand Aid, that working alongside, and New Zealand government's bringing some money to the table as well. Talk to us about making sure that you are having partnerships without compromise in that regard, Ian.
Yeah, we have a pretty forward looking government in this regard. So, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade is who we come alongside,
Yep.
and 8 to 10 of the larger NGOs, non government organisations, have contracts with them over a number of years and in a number of countries. So we have a partnership with them that lasts 5 years and then rolls over again, and they let us play to our strengths.
Okay.
So we're right in the process of redesigning a program with them that improves people's agricultural livelihoods and helps get them out of poverty, and then addresses the trafficking and the exploitation that bears down on these communities, because they are two sides of the same coin. People who are vulnerable to poverty, are vulnerable to exploitation. Fix one and you've helped fix the other.
Yep.
Government get this. They have some very skilled people in their camp. And so we co-design this. And they even don't mind us bringing faith to the table. If you
Mm-hmm.
take the Pacific, 9 out of 10 people have a faith. Even a secular government understands this, and that's a strong motivator for people, when used correctly, to help bring about the sort of change, a sort of social change. I'll give you an example in the islands. If we get church pastors on board around preventing domestic violence, if they put that message out there and use scripture, they are a force for good
Yeah.
on those issues. If they're silent on it, then the church is the missing partner, because it's got everything to say about that, about the treatment of women and children, so it needs to speak up. And we help it do that, and government is very happy to back us to help them do that too.
Something else which has changed and expanded, I suppose, the bigger picture over these last 50 years. Initially a response to poverty, to hunger, to famine, but looking at broader issues. I know this is an area that Tearfund does a lot of work in: human trafficking and sexual exploitation, of course connected with people who are trapped in poverty. Also, issues such as environmental concerns and ethical consumerism. These are all, some people would say, are these side issues from tackling poverty, from supporting people to get the food and resources that they need?
Yeah, they're not side issues. Let's take the ethical fashion. There are around 50 to 60 million garment workers in Asia. Now, if you take Bangladesh as a population of New Zealand, working in and around Dhaka, slaving away behind sewing machines.
Yeah.
Right, treated well and paid a fair wage, they can help put their children through school, even to university. It is a pathway off the village farm, if you like, into manufacturing, and then on, the economy will grow. This is the story of the Industrial Revolution, right,
Yeah.
with the mills in the north of England. So it is a pathway, but it can be highly exploitative. And so we shone a light down that with our ethical fashion work and said, well, companies who make clothes should report something of how those supply chains are working, and it provides some visibility into that. So we could go and spend our limited money, and it's limited, in the charity sector, and maybe work with a handful of garment workers, or we could get to the fashion labels and dial up the pressure a little bit and help consumers grow in their awareness. And all of a sudden, you're moving the needle for 50 to 60 million workers. And
Yeah.
so that's why we do that. Right at the really sharp end of this is human trafficking. At the 6.4 million women and girls in sexual exploitation. I don't need to describe on your radio show how there's a market for sex in the world. And so we aim to put a stop to that trafficking, and we have some real teeth in that. And as of today, we've helped ensure that 880 women and girls, mostly some boys, have been freed from slavery in sexual exploitation, mainly in the Thailand area,
Mm.
and there have been 200 prosecutions through the courts. And so we have a very gritty partner called Lift, who look very much like a paralegal service to the Royal Thai Police, and they investigate organised crime and human trafficking. And we don't do it because we believe that penal systems alone work. We do it because we believe it's so rampant, and the dignity, the God-given dignity in those individuals is just being crushed while they're exploited like that. And we want to see them free, and we do indeed want to see people held to account for their behaviour.
And it's cyclical, of course, because people who are trapped in poverty, desperate people make desperate choices. So providing people with other sources of income, as well as prosecuting people who are involved in this evil industry. This is all part of the big picture for you guys, right?
Well, and increasingly we put those two together. So again, back to that Solomon Islands story where you've got migrant labourers coming in say, the forestry industry and marrying a young girl and, for the stay, then they'll go back home and they'll abandon her,
Mm.
and any children had to her. So that's just wrong on every level. So we want to tackle that from both ends now. So we want to improve the livelihoods in those communities. And so we work with a youth development and agricultural partner who's really good at taking that young Pacific population and helping them grow things, create livelihoods, get them to market, so that exploitative practices are less attractive to them. We put the bylaws in place. We strengthen the police's resolve to work on the worst of the cases, and all of a sudden you're closing the gap. People's livelihoods are more viable, and the deterrent is there. If you want to traffic someone, you're going to get, we're going to come after you.
Yeah.
We're going to put a stop to that. And we're just seeing lives transformed by that, and people freed from that sort of pressure on the poor, and those sort of very, very poor choices that just end up in tragedies of lives. And it's really quite unnecessary. You've probably been watching the news like me with Barbara Drever's reports
Yeah.
on the methamphetamine problem in the Pacific. I haven't even fully got to grips with this yet, but I have zero doubt that the drugs trafficking through the Pacific, destined for New Zealand and Australian markets, will simply be driving now more and more poor choices and more exploitation. So I actually fear we have quite a work ahead of us in that area.
There is a lot to be done, Ian. I mean, 50 years, God has done a lot of things through the work of Tearfund, but it seems like there's plenty to be getting on with in the next wee while. We very much appreciate the work that you do, the partnership relationship that you have with us here at Rhema Media. As you celebrate 50 years of what God has done through this ministry, how are you different and how are you the same, do you think?
Well, it was Jesus who said, "The poor will always be with you," and it's a very hard verse to swallow.
Yeah.
But I guess he's quoting the Old Testament, because then he says, "Open your hand," to those in poverty. So everybody knew what he was quoting from Deuteronomy. It wasn't a "therefore you may do nothing."
Yeah.
It was "therefore you will respond." And they go on. If we don't respond, the prophets say the stones will cry out.
Yeah.
God cares about injustice deeply. He cares for each of his human beings on planet Earth. And so that has not changed. It was true yesterday, it's true today, it'll be true tomorrow. And also what hasn't changed is just the wonderful supporters up and down New Zealand who get this and want to see change in their own communities, but want to see it abroad and realise that we are actually reasonably lucky in New Zealand, whatever challenges we may have on a daily basis. The things that are changing is we're creating real deterrence against trafficking. We're genuinely lifting people out of poverty. We know so much more than ever before how to keep communities safe from disaster. And that work will only continue to strengthen, and we are lifting children out of poverty in record numbers.
There's super good stuff indeed, and certainly plenty to celebrate there, as well as more work to be done. Ian, thank you for what you and the team are doing. Of course, tearfund.org.nz for more information about that work. But thanks for being on the program today.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.